All right, we are back yet again with Archive Memories. Thanks so much for tuning in, if you are tuning in and have tuned in the past.
Anyone who hasn't given up on us yet, there's no hope for them. So, you poor lost soul, welcome.
While Nyan may curse you, or Isaac may curse you, whatever he likes to get called these days.
This dumb idiot.
Yeah, what this dumb idiot may curse you. I certainly appreciate, the 20 or so of you that listen to us talk about this old dead game. And I reckon it's about 20, just going based off like viewer counts.
I think
Like,
it's just your mom watching it 20 times.
that would be impressive if it was, because I have certainly by no means ever gave her any inclination that this exists. So
That's probably wise. You don't want to have that conversation over Thanksgiving.
yeah,
My grandchildren. I recorded a Netrunner podcast.
yeah. I mean, takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any prerequisite conversations to have before we jump right in? I mean, there's not really a lot going on in the world of Netrunner, is there, these days?
Well, I taught my wife Netrunner last week.
Oh, did you? How did that go?
Pretty well. She almost flatlined me, but not quite. Playing some Jinteki.
Nice. Did she seem to grasp it pretty well?
Yes. Particularly the whole poker bluffing aspect of it, I think she quite enjoyed.
That is good to hear. I have not made any attempts to teach my wife Netrunner, but we've played a lot of other card and board games. I've in the past attempted to like teach girlfriends, or I guess really just a girlfriend Netrunner, but it did not go well. She did not seem to grasp it at all. I have a distinct memory of me like trying to like contain my autistic rage when there was like an AstroScript counter that she had, and she was like not scoring an agenda with it, and I was like,
yeah, it's not for everybody.
yeah. But that's fun though. All right, well, we talked about something that's not a card, so I guess now we'll talk about cards.
Yeah, cards. That's why we're here.
All right, you want to kick us off on this one, or you want me to do the honors?
I'll get this one. All right. First up today, we have Data Mine, going right back into the ice, which is where Kika likes to be.
Yes.
Or Aaron, whoever he is. Yeah, so Data Mine. Data Mine is a Jinteki piece of ice. It has the subtypes Trap and AP. So notably, it's not a code gate, a barrier, or a sentry. It is 0 credits to res. It has 2 strength. It has 1 subroutine, which reads do 1 net damage, trash Data Mine, and it is 2 influence. All right. So, Aaron, the obvious thing about Data Mine, the 2 obvious things. 1, it trashes itself after doing 1 net damage. That's not amazing. Second is that it doesn't have any of the common ice subtypes. What does this mean, and why didn't it matter?
Well, what it means is on paper, right, that it can't be broken in, a million quotation marks. But what it actually means is that it definitely can be broken, and by not only one specific icebreaker in the core set, but also many, many icebreakers throughout the game's existence.
Actually, maybe figuratively, hundreds of icebreakers.
It's a lot. So Data Mine never really caught on because I think this was another card that was kind of a casualty of them not really knowing how strong like certain things were going to be and how strong certain concepts were going to be.
Sure.
Trap Ice being one of them. Data Mine could absolutely just do 1 net damage and not trash itself, and I think it would not only be fine, but also still probably never get played.
Yeah, it's more of a failure to recognize mechanical significance of the game they were designing. Bits of it, like you were saying, its numbers are not the worst, but and it's just the self trash thing. The self trash thing really is a problem because it's the action cost.
Yeah, because you got to pay to install it, and if it's not the first piece of ice in a server, it's going to cost you 1 or 2 or 3, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's always a cost that has to be kept in mind. You're spending the click to play it. Now, 0 to res is nice and is, enticing even. But all for the effect of doing 1 net damage, which is not really worth it, especially when not just in the core set, but as well as, later on in the game's lifespan. It was probably gonna still get broken.
Yeah, and it's a net damage, so it's like you're trying to kill the runner. This isn't going to kill the runner by itself, basically ever. Nobody in their right mind is making a run on a Jinteki server with 0 cards in their hand.
Yeah,
And
this
so you
is
need other pieces with it, and it's going to self trash. And what if they just like get zapped and then jack out? Was it worth any of this? It's real cutting room floor food.
yeah, you could argue that it's supposed to just sort of be like an additional hurdle or something along those lines where maybe they do make that run and they have 3 cards in their hand, but then you hit them with a data mine. Now they only have 2, so then it kind of puts them in a bit of a bind of whether they do want to continue with the run or jack out.
What if there's a snare waiting for me? But
Right. And so then at that point, you might argue that it definitely is worth it. That, if you can res this for 0 and ultimately, end a run, then. But another problem, though, kind of with that mindset, is that Jinteki, I feel, is most comfortable when the runner is accessing their cards just at a cost and, in a capacity that they want them to.
yeah.
So, it's hard to say. It's just, this card I don't think is terrible by any means, but it's just really lackluster. I will say that it seems a little more reasonable outside of like if you're really trying to do like something with like a Chronos project or protocol.
Sure. But I mean, that's one that you kind of want to be in control of when the net damage happens to some extent. This one you are very much not.
Yeah, but it any like near guaranteed or
Sure. Any port in a storm, I guess.
yeah, and any like point of net damage that you're gonna get that is a lot more likely to fire is gonna come pretty welcome in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. It's just one of those things that I don't think this card even works in theory, because the theory is, oh, they're just running normal breakers, which certainly happened. There was criminals on a number of occasions during their highs would, only run standard decoder fractor killer breakers. And so they wouldn't have a way to break this, but it's like, even if they don't, what's the real effect? It's just you say it's not terrible. I don't really agree. I think this is terrible.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't. To me though, it's like when you say it's terrible, it's like to me terrible is putting it in the same company as Zaibatsu Loyalty, um, those
I
sorts of
don't
things.
think it's a lot better than Zaibatsu Loyalty. I'm being real here.
I mean, I think that any card that you can make an argument that will have a decent enough effect, in at least one type of deck, is definitely going to be in a different echelon than something like Zaibatsu. Like, I think this card is totally fine and works, like I said, if you're going to try to make like a Chronos Protocol deck. Is that great? No. Does that make it good? No. But do I think that keeps it from being in like, terrible category? Yes, because Zaibatsu Loyalty is terrible no matter how you slice it. I think that while it may be one type of deck, it's definitely worth looking at. Will you maybe even slot it? Maybe not. But if you're really just trying to maximize, net damage snipes, then I think this works fine for that.
I'm going to put it to you this way. Even if I'm like running up against Chronos Protocol and I encounter this ice, let's just assume like best case scenario for me, and I have an installed AI breaker that can break this for 1 credit. I might not break this just so that it's gone and off the board, and I don't need to think about it anymore. I don't need to pay a tax. to get past it.
Sure, that's fair.
It's
But then,
just non-threatening.
yeah, but then at that point, it depends on what you have in your hand, and of course, if you don't care about what you have in your hand, then obviously,
Sure.
but you can make that argument for anything that does net damage. That if you don't care about what's in your hand, then does it really matter that much?
Not entirely. Like,
I guess any low.
Neural EMPs aren't relevant based on what's in your hand nearly so much as that they're a kill threat. I don't feel like this is ever a kill threat.
Yeah, but I think that this is very obviously it's not a kill threat, but I don't think that every instance of net damage needs to be looked at through the lens of a kill threat.
Perhaps.
Do I think this card is good? No. I mean, definitely not. I mean, I guess spoilers for the rating portion, but I don't think it's terrible.
Mm-hmm. I think you make some decent arguments.
I mean, you're not going to see me probably putting it in any decks, but I mean,
the lover of ice himself is not going to put this in a deck. I'll leave it at that.
Hey, there's plenty of ice that I'm not going to put in a deck. All right. But I don't know. Is there much more to be said about this? I mean,
really. This obviously did not affect the meta.
No.
Because the meta just blew past this. AI breakers were too prominent for this to ever be relevant.
Yeah. There ended up just being a lot of AI breakers.
Yeah. If I just wanted a really cheap piece of tax ice, I could bring a pup. If I wanted pings, there are more reliable ways to do it.
Yeah. I think that in order for this to have been anything, I don't think it would have taken a lot to make this a little more worth looking at, but
all right. Let's play that game with it real quick. What would you have changed?
I think that should just be one of our regular questions now. Is just what would you change to make a card that's not good worth running?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
But honestly, I would probably say just I think if you just remove the trash data mine clause, I think that makes this fine. Probably not good still, but fine.
I would agree with that. I would run this if it didn't trash itself. Not everywhere, but sometimes. Sometimes I would run this.
Because I think that keeping it at 0 to res certainly makes it really enticing. The 2 strength, obviously not really kicking down any doors. And you got to keep it as a trap, because that's kind of the whole point of it.
Right, and if it's not self-trashing, then you can get into discussions about, okay, do I run this alongside swordsmen, and now I've maybe got some actual real threats guarding this particular server.
Yeah, so
not kill threats necessarily, but I'm gonna speed bump you every time you try to get in.
Yeah. Flavor.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and read the flavor text on this one. Access harmless file.dat.z. Are you sure? Yes, no. I like it actually.
Yeah, it's fun.
It makes me smile.
Fun little piece of flavor text. The weird kind of like cartoon bomb art, I don't know that I'm necessarily in love with.
Yeah, it feels like you could have done something better with it. This is a little bit like early Netrunner art feeling.
Yeah, it seems like a cop out almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like they couldn't really...
I'm gonna field a gripe with this one. It's a data mine, and this is like a Mario bomb.
Yeah, it's definitely not data Mario bomb. It's data mine, and yeah.
Yeah, so they let us down here.
Yeah, so kind of whatever on the art. Flavor text, pretty good though.
Pretty good. Yeah. All right, you want to rate this bad boy?
I do, and I am going to rate it a 2.
I am going to give it a 1.
Yeah,
I just really don't like self-trashing ice. I don't want to reinstall my ice.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really blame you there. I mean, it's certainly annoying. And in this case, there's not really anything to justify it. But
they were worried about it being too strong. I understand why they built it the way they did. I just don't like this.
The foresight they did not have.
No.
But we're going to move on.
I believe it's your turn.
It is. And up next we have Neural Katana. It is a Jinteki Ice. It has the subtypes Sentry and AP. Costs 4 to res and has 3 strength. Has a single subroutine that reads do 3 net damage. And it is 2 influence, again, out of the Jinteki faction. So, Isaac. Why, despite looking like a pretty badass and like powerful card, did this never really see any sort of play?
Well, to explain that, I'm gonna take you through our Wayback Machine here to an earlier episode we did, the name of which I do not remember, where we discussed a card called Mimic. Now, Mimic breaks this Neural Katana, which is 4 to res, for 1 credit. That is a bad ROI for the Corp.
Yeah, the numbers just don't really work out super great on this.
Now, 3 net damage is a great subroutine.
3 net damage definitely is.
But the subroutine is easily broken.
Yeah, very easily pinged for 1 credit by Mimic and a myriad of other Sentry Breakers in the game. And at 4 to res, it's just really not worth it.
No, it's not. It's expensive, especially in early Netrunner ice terms. 4 is a noticeable investment.
Because think about it, for 1 more credit, you get an Ichi, which is, I would argue, a significantly more potent piece of ice.
It's 3 subroutines instead of 1. It's 1 more strength, and out of vanilla Mimic range, it's a lot. It's a lot better. All that said, however, Neural Katana is a card that, as a baby runner, taught me not to face check ice. This is a good card to learn some valuable lessons off of.
That is true. This is definitely a lesson learning card, because when you face check this bad boy without your fancy schmancy Mimic, or whatever your killer of choice may be, it feels pretty not good.
Yeah.
Because taking 3 net damage, I mean, that's more than half of your hand, assuming that you haven't done any nonsense.
If you do not have the ability to break this when you run into it, it effectively reads take 3 net damage and end the run, because you're not continuing.
Yeah, you're not gonna risk hitting a snare, or touching a fetal AI or any sort of Jinteki gobbledygook that may, lie past this this spicy sword.
Yeah, it's not worth it. So I really appreciated Neural Katana when it came out, but it did not age very well. And by age very well, I mean exit the core set feeling very good about itself.
No, I think this was another, this is a lesson learner card in multiple ways, in that I think this was a lesson learning card for Fantasy Flight as well, because this is kind of the blueprint for what you need to do a little better than. This was like,
Right.
Like, we missed the mark with Neural Katana, so we're kind of going to take that blueprint and then make other ice where we, kind of skew some of the numbers and effects. Because I think that cards like Tsurugi and Komainu and Cortex Lock, I think, are all a lot better than Neural Katana.
Yeah, Cortex Lock is much more threatening in that early stage. When people are face checking ice. I know you personally really enjoyed running Cortex Lock out of Next Design because it was just a left field face slap.
Exactly.
Tsurugi is a great example, because as well as Komainu, because both of them were expensive to break.
Right. Neural Katana, I think. I mean, I guess we really kind of already said all there is to say about it. It's just the numbers just did not line up well for it, as far as what it did and the cost that you had to pay for it to do it.
Yeah. Most players that I know would far and away rather run Tsurugi, which is 2 credits more to res and has 1 less strength, basically solely on the subject of it has 4 subroutines instead of 1.
Yep, exactly. And then, yeah, I think all of the mileage that you would hope to get out of a Neural Katana, you got way better out of a card like Cortex Lock.
Yeah, agreed.
So, now let's play the what would you change? What would you change, Isaac, to make this card good?
I mean, at the time of the release, with all the hindsight we now have, I would have maybe given it 3 do 1 net damage subroutines. That might make it reasonable.
Yeah, I think that would be fair. Might be a little too much, because I mean, a 3 credit tax for a 4 to res, it almost might have been more interesting, maybe even if you just kind of split it up and had like a do 1 net damage and a do 2 net damage subroutine.
Could be, yeah. It's a little unorthodox, but I don't hate it.
Yeah, because then it also opens up sort of an interesting choice to be made where maybe the runner just elects to eat the 1 damage subroutine and then break the 2 damage one. And
Hmm.
and then it's, if they are going to break it every time, then it remains just kind of a 2 credit tax for Mimic, which, while not nothing, isn't kind of a crazy tax.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. This card, however, it did affect the meta because this card is one of the reasons Mimic saw so much earlier popularity.
That is true. You could argue that it is sort of a meta defining card in that sense that everybody played Mimic because of this, and nobody played this because of Mimic.
Yeah, pretty much.
But what are our thoughts on the flavor of Neural Katana?
Well, you want to read its flavor text for us?
I sure will. Man, how did I get stuck with this one? Um, Forged by AK.WA on 231179-23, filed 2311.79-23.2 with number 34K-LW3-21HH-4I, Samurai included.
I wonder if there's like some sort of reference hidden in there that we're just not getting.
This looks like a bunch of bullshit to me.
It does. It does.
I think this is going to be like the reverse for me of the data mine, where I think it's a definite L on the flavor text, but this art fucking rules.
Listen, I'm as prone to make fun of a weeb as the next guy, but this art does rule. It is great.
Like, you just got this badass fucking samurai, all black armor. I kind of like the juxtaposition there sort of is, where the samurai himself does not look particularly like cyber or net spacey.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's got the fucking laser katana. He's got the titular neural katana.
Yes, the brain katana is gonna get you.
Yeah. Super sick. Very striking art. This was one of the cards that I distinctly remember me. Because I mean, one of the big reasons why I fell in love with Netrunner, and I think a lot of people can probably agree, is just because this aesthetic and this ethos that it really brought. Sure. When you're just thumbing through all the cards, and you definitely stop and see cards like this, and before you know anything about the game and know anything about how it's played, you see this and you're like, oh, that's fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
So always have a soft spot for Neural Katana, because this was one that definitely caught my eye early on.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Gorgeous art. I've never seen, like, to my knowledge, the full version of it. I'd be curious too.
Yeah, I don't think that I have either. I wonder if there's like a clip art monkey anywhere that we're not seeing.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, what are we rating Neural Katana?
I am going to give it 3 net damage out of 5.
Interesting. This may seem odd and may seem heretical, but I am going to give it a 2, same as Datamine.
Interesting. I'm going to need you to defend that real quick.
The way that I'm going to defend it is, I mean, ultimately, right, despite, kind of all the discussions that we had, I think I saw Neural Katana ran just about as commonly as I did Datamine, which is basically not at all.
Perhaps. I think this was a more important card for both learning and shaping the experience of Netrunner, though, from a design standpoint and from a player standpoint.
Yeah. I guess maybe that is worth a point in and of itself. I guess, you know what? I'll bump it to a 3.
Let's go. I believe it's my turn now.
It sure is, brother.
All right, well, next up we have Wall of Thorns, yet more Jinteki Ice. This one has the subtypes Barrier and AP. It is 8 credits to res. That's pricey. It has 5 strength and 2 subroutines, which read do 2 net damage and end the run. And it is 1 influence. So, Aaron, this is a pretty big piece of ice. Jinteki was for a very long time known for having a mediocre ice suite. By mediocre, I mean not good. Why didn't this help?
Well, the reason why this didn't help is because it's really fucking expensive, and Jinteki, of all of the core set factions, was notoriously poor.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, what Jinteki deck was ever going to be able to fucking res this thing?
It's so much money. This is two of your three hedge funds just on this piece of ice, and only for some jerk like noise to come along and put a parasite on it.
Yeah, just the absolute worst. Now, like, honestly, is it the worst piece of ice ever? No.
Like compared to Heimdall. Heimdall 1 has one extra subroutine, but is a Bioroid that can break those subroutines and has one more strength than this. So they're not totally dissimilar.
Yeah, though I guess now that you do kind of put it that way, maybe this does kind of suck.
It
Because
does kind of suck.
for the same price you get Heimdall, which an extra strength and an extra subroutine, and I get it, there's the whole Bioroid thing, but Bioroids aren't about hard locking the runner out. They're about taxing.
True.
And you could make that argument about ice in general, right?
What was the famous quote? And the run is a crutch.
And the run is a crutch. Classic quote. But and you get so much more of a tax for the same price out of old Jaime D.
You do. You do. It's 2 credits more tax off of a corroder and most reasonable fractors. And this can be broken by Morningstar without data sucker intervention. That's the real kicker.
That is true. Honestly, in the Morningstar meta, you definitely don't want to be packing this bad boy.
No.
What I will say, I mean, I'll give it some points though, in that it is kind of the rare barrier that is not safe, quote unquote, to face check.
True.
Now obviously Heimdall not particularly safe either. Though I mean, if you've got clicks, then you're fine.
Right. That's always been the big check against HB ice. HB has really good ice, but the nasty subroutines don't land very often just because people run with clicks.
But this a click is not going to help you.
No.
If you decide to just start poking at servers, this may even you may even give yourself like a false sense of security, right? Say you do have that mimic out on field, and you're like, all right, I'm feeling spicy, feeling strong. I'm going to start jabbing at some servers. If your opponent does res this wall of thorns, I mean, it probably doesn't feel too good.
No. Like 2 net damage is a lot more than 1. Like unironically, 2 net damage is you're risking losing something important from your hand pretty likely.
One might argue that it's double one even.
You could argue that, but like it feels like even more than that to me. Like understand that I'm now talking in totally subjective terms, but 2 net damage hurts, and 1 is you just kind of deal with it.
Yeah, I will say that the difference between 1 net damage and 2 net damage is definitely significant. It feels significant for sure. Because you're going from there being, I guess not that good of a shot that you're going to lose your sure gamble to like, oh fuck, I'm going to be poor.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me ask you a question about it then. Jinteki got much wealthier later on, especially like replicating perfection decks. They were running sundews.
Yeah.
They had a lot more as far as funds. Why didn't they run Wall of Thorns? Because they were running things like Komainu and Tsurugi, which, while less expensive than this, also were oftentimes cheaper to break. Not always.
Yeah, I think the reason why is because I think that barriers ended up just kind of being the gear check and the run sort of spot in a Dex Ice Suite, and this was not that. This is supposed to be a big, heavy, taxing piece of ice, and if you're looking for that, you're gonna look elsewhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Dex would much rather just slot a Himitsubako, as their barrier.
Yeah, force someone to install a fractor.
Yeah, and make them have to get their fractor out on the board, and then it only costs you what Mitsubaku's what tutor is.
Sure. This is also in David range, and a lot of Jinteki decks, at least ones that I built, I liked to run their ice below David range just to render David useless.
That is true. That is definitely fair. That David also makes this cry a little bit. What would you change on it? What would you adjust on Wall of Thorns to give it that extra oomph that maybe it needs?
I mean, particularly early on in the game's life cycle, I would have bumped 2 credits off of its res cost.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that myself. Of if two is maybe too much, but I don't know. At six to res, I don't
It's
think
still
that.
expensive. It's
Yeah,
still
it's still
quite expensive.
yeah, it's still expensive, and I don't think that it makes it like broken by any means. I mean,
No, I don't think so either.
yeah, I think Wall of Thorns at six to res would be. Uh,
Reasonable.
I think yeah, it'd be worth looking at.
Even and at one influence, it's something that you might think about importing if you just had a spare bit of influence floating around in an early cycle deck.
Yeah, I think I either did or was looking at splashing this into pretty early, like HB and eventually next design decks.
I mean, it's an end the run. It has an additional effect that's not awful. You're never going to kill someone with it, but it's a decent gear check.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think at six to res, this would end up being pretty good.
Once again, numbers working against the cards.
Yeah, what's with all the numbers in this game, man?
It's just a bunch of nerd numbers.
Yeah, kind of bullshit, honestly.
Not much meta influence.
No, I don't. I really never saw this card.
No. Well, should we talk about its flavor?
I suppose that we should.
All right, I'll go ahead and read it. Most runners do their business in full sim, with their rigs wired directly into their brains. The setup has a large number of advantages, with the runner able to process data and input commands far faster than a traditional meat-bound system. But it also means greater risk.
Also means that your brain is closer to those programs to get touched.
To these purple tentacles.
There's no keyboard in between your brain and these tentacles.
Oof. Those keyboards, they did so much to protect us and we didn't appreciate them.
Flavor's all right.
Mediocre, but the art, I'm going to go ahead and say, is pretty substandard. It just looks like some thorns. It doesn't even look net-y to my eyes.
Yeah, I think they tried to go for the purple to sort of impose that sort of cyber feeling onto it, but I think they neglected to realize that there are also plants that are just like kind of that color.
Sure, this just feels like a scene from a Harry Potter book more than a Netrunner card to me.
Yeah. It was all true, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hollows Part 2.
Ugh.
One thing that I remember about this specifically is, did you ever play the game Summoner Wars?
Yes. Yes, I did.
I remember that Summoner Wars was one of the games that I got when I first started a board game collection. I sold my Warhammer 40,000 army and then just bought a bunch of board games off Miniature Market.
Right move.
Yep. And Summoner Wars was one of the things that I got with it. I got Summoner Wars, like the base set, and then like a bunch of expansions for it. And I remember that one of the summoners, he was like a druid type dude, and he had a wall that he could place that was called Wall of Thorns.
I see.
And I always joked that I wanted to just slot one of those in one of my sleeves when I went to a Netrunner tournament.
You see what you did, Lucas, is you made a card so overlookable and forgettable that the card that Aaron remembers is from the extraordinarily not incredibly awesome game Summoner Wars instead of Netrunner, the greatest card game of all time.
Yeah, Summoner Wars was okay. It wasn't great. It was all right though.
It was pretty forgettable.
That is fair. I think I've played it all.
It took me like 5 seconds to remember that I had in fact played it.
That's fair. I think the majority of my Summoner Wars cards have not been touched ever.
Yeah.
Probably rightfully so. Anyway, what are we rating Wall of Thorns?
Wall of Thorns gets a big fat 2.
I
2
agree.
net damage out of 5.
Yeah, I agree.
It doesn't deserve a 1. It definitely doesn't deserve a 3. So it gets a 2 by default.
Yeah, this definitely does not get over the hump to 3. Not even close, really.
No.
So, into the 2 zone it goes.
All right, well, it looks like we're done with the ice for now.
Oh, I want to go back to the ice.
You want to go back to Wall of Thorns?
No, yeah. I guess let's move on then. Next we've got Akitara Watanabe. Or Watanabe. How do you say that? How do you say that surname?
I always hear like Ken Watanabe, the actor's voice name pronounced that way, Watanabe. So I'm just gonna go with that.
Okay, Akitaro Watanabe. He is an upgrade. He has the subtypes Sysop and Unorthodox. He has 1 credit to res. His text reads, "The res cost of ice protecting this server is lowered by 2." It is 3 credits to trash, and it comes at 2 influence out of the Jinteki faction. So, Isaac, why is this card not good?
All right. This card is an economy card. You install it, you res it, you've now paid a click and a credit to have this effect up and running. Now, this is going to lower the res cost of the ice protecting the server by 2. Now, things that this influences is ice that you have not resed yet. That means you need to put this into a server that the runner has not tried to get into, or that you just haven't had to, or that you just chose not to res anything on so far. Because every consecutive piece of ice that you install is costing you more money. This is an economy card, which encourages you to be irresponsible with your spending. This is like hiring a hedge fund manager who tells you that what you need to do, the best investment you can make, is to go buy a bunch of brand new BMWs and drive them all 30,000 miles and then sell them.
That doesn't sound like very sound financial advice. But
It
however,
doesn't, does it?
I hear the listeners asking us though, Isaac. But you just got done complaining about how expensive the Jinteki ice is and how they don't have money.
Right, I don't have money to res that ice, let alone install it and res it. The second one cost me a credit. Third one cost me 2 credits. Fourth one cost me 3 credits. By the time I'm getting return on investment on Watanabe here, I'm broke.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Is that at face value it seems pretty decent, right? Like it lowers the cost of ice protecting the server by 2. Like that's pretty damn good.
Mhm.
But the problem is that in order for it to work in the way that you want it to work, right? Saving you a bunch of money, you have to have a bunch of fucking ice on the server. In order to have a bunch of fucking ice on the server, you gotta spend a lot of fucking money.
A lot of money and a lot of clicks.
And it's just not good.
No. Especially early Jinteki. Early Jinteki is playing shell games, not installing gigantic walls of ice.
Yeah, early Jinteki not a vertical faction by any means. Definitely a horizontal faction.
And by the time you did, you just had Caprice Nisei, and Watanabe was out of a job.
Yep. I will say that I either did put this or thought about putting it. I might have tried it out a little bit. I did definitely try this in some iterations of Next. But I don't remember it working very well.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised.
Mostly because I learned this was in the early days of Next, before I even learned the secrets of Next. Because the reason why I played Next so much and I was so successful with Next is because I was really early to learning that Next you don't play Next the way that you think that you should play Next.
Oh, how do you play it?
Well, a lot of people when they first saw Next, they were like, "Oh, this is a glacier. This is a glacier ID if I've ever seen one." You know, I get a bunch of ice out onto the table, and then I just start stacking ice, and then they can never get in. And that's why I kind of messed around with Mr. Watanabe here, is because in the interest of making those gigantic ice forts, I was like, damn, my boy Akataro will really save me some cash when I make those big super servers. But that's stupid because that's not what you want to do with Next. What you want to do with Next is you want to play them really quick and actually kind of horizontal in that you want to get your ice out there really quick and just start shoving agendas out as quick as possible and just gear check your opponent into oblivion and just dare them to get their rig online before you can score out.
That does sound like a more fun way to play them anyway.
Yeah, and I always found it to be a lot more successful. But in that kind of deck, Mr. Watanabe here also does not work.
Well, I just want to applaud you, Aaron, that you managed to take this Jinteki upgrade and turn it into a discussion about Next design.
I could take any card in this game and turn it into a discussion about Next design. I don't care if it's Corp, Runner, Event, Operation, Upgrade.
I look forward to seeing you do that with the next card.
Oh, that's a good thing. Joke thing you said. Anyway, yeah, the problem is that Mr. Akitaro Watanabe here is for a Jinteki deck that does not exist and never did exist.
Correct.
Which is a big Glacier Ice Fort Jinteki deck, which that was never a thing, and I don't think that was ever going to be a thing. I think it's kind of weird that they designed this card.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know where they thought this was going to come into the whole thing.
The only thing I can think...
Cell Portal?
Maybe?
This must have been designed by the same guy who put Cell Portal in.
This, I think, the only argument, or I guess not argument, but the only thing I could see for this maybe is that they designed this card as a influence tax card, where they knew that they wanted to make this card, but they thought that it would be too powerful out of the other factions, so they put it in an odd faction to where you would have to spend the influence to have it.
Here you go, Jinteki. Just take the garbage. You don't have good cards that we want you to run.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not defending that decision by any means, but that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Perhaps.
Is that they didn't want to print this in HB because they thought it would be too strong. Or they didn't want to make it neutral because then it would be too strong, which I don't think in either case would be the case.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Maybe not, I don't know. This actually might be kind of good in HB.
I don't believe it.
Well, how would you make it kind of good then?
Okay, I got it. It took me a minute. I would take this card and put it in the trash.
Oh, I don't know if that makes it good.
Well, at least it's where it belongs.
I mean,
in all seriousness, if I wanted to make this good, 1, I would get rid of its res cost. 2, it needs some other effect other than just like lowering res cost. It needs to be able to do something. Like, I don't know, when you res it, gain 1 credit for each installed ice in this server. Something. It needs something else besides just only looking forward. Because if you draw this in the mid game, it's trash, and you just want to throw it away immediately.
Yeah, it is hard to say. It definitely should not have a res cost. That's for sure. I think it should not have a res cost. It should probably have like 2 more trash cost.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
And then it probably should have like a spicy, like Jinteki sort of effect of like, you know, the res cost of ice protecting the server is lowered by 2, and the runner cannot jack out from runs on the server or something.
Or, you know, you could leave its trash cost at 3 and say, you know, when this card is trashed, when the runner trashes this card, resolve a subroutine on 1 piece of ice protecting the server. I don't know, something.
Or even just if the runner trashes this, you know, like do a net damage or something. Yeah.
Sure.
Something. Got to be something.
He needed a spicy left hook, and he doesn't have one.
Yeah, he's got nothing, honestly. This card sucks. This is not a good card.
It's a bad card. Well, what about its flavor?
Yeah, I was gonna say flavor is kind of whatever. This is one of the more anime looking cards.
That's very true.
This looks like straight up like a screen grab from like a cartoon.
Yes. It might even be, and they just overlaid some Jinteki logos onto it.
Yeah. The flavor text, just don't ask how he does it. How does he do it?
Is this like a you don't want to know how the sausage is made, but with Jinteki servers?
But with Jinteki saving money on resing ice?
Just don't ask how he saves you money. Because he doesn't. Because it's a scam.
He is a scammer. Alright, are we gonna rate this guy?
Yeah, let's do it. He gets a 0.
Yeah, he's a 0, man. This card fucking sucks. I don't think anybody ever played this card.
It's bad design space. It's dumb. It needs to go away and get off my screen.
Yeah, get out of here. What do we have next here?
Well, next up, we are out of Jinteki and on to probably my favorite Corp faction, NBN. So we have the core NBN identity here, making news. It is an identity with the Megacorp subtype, because that turned out to be so important later on. It has a deck size of 45 and influence of 15 as per normal. And its ability is 2 recurring credits. Use these credits during trace attempts. Alright, Kika. NBN was quite popular. particularly as a fast advance faction. Why this ability? Do you think that this ability was a good fit for NBN, particularly in the core set?
No, this is a classic example of like of essentially what is essentially a blank identity.
Mm.
This, I think they had an idea of what they meant NBN to be in the core set, and then eventually, very eventually, come like Data and Destiny era.
Right.
Did I think we finally what I think FFG meant for them to be like came into any sort of fruition? Being like a really trace heavy, just drown the opponent in traces, and basically just do a lot of traces, I guess.
Right.
But they were not that. They were a fast advance, choo choo, all aboard the Astro train. The fun stops here. Identity a number one.
I am going to score 7 points before you have found your second icebreaker.
Yes. With an extra little spice in there of being able to splash in like a pack of Sea Source Scorched package.
Yeah, a very effective double threat where if the runner wanted to try to break in and stop NBN from scoring out their Astro train, they had to go fast and they had to expose themselves to possible murder in the process.
Yeah, and if there's one thing you don't want to do while NBN is around, it's expose yourself.
Correct, because they'll put the pictures on the internet and then sell corporate advertising.
I will say, I guess maybe I'll walk back my claim of this being, kind of a blank identity. I do think in a lot of instances and in a lot of games even, this ended up being a blank identity.
Sure.
Certainly an underutilized ability. But in the interest of being able to pack that Sea Source Scorched package and then eventually the Mid-Seasons Scorched package, the 2 credits during those traces was absolutely not nothing.
Yeah. They were nice, but we talked about this early on with traces as we were discussing them, but traces were mechanically weird. Recurring credits is kind of one of the few ways that you can make them kind of useful for the corporation, because you can get them into kind of legitimately taxing range without costing the corporation anything, but it's just weird.
Yeah, traces, I think, as we discussed, are stupid.
Yeah, pretty stupid.
And they were, from the get-go, just a whack concept that never, ever worked in the way that I think FFG wanted them to work.
You can describe traces effectively this way to get the right idea about them, I think. No one who I ever taught Netrunner to would I explain traces to them until they came up in-game.
Yeah.
Because it's just like this weird wart that makes no sense until you're actually doing it, and it's like, why is this here?
And then ultimately it just boils down to, okay, are you going to spend a bunch of money? Oh, okay, yep, I'm not. Okay, whatever, the thing happens.
Right, exactly. And there weren't even that many traces in the core set here. Like, we had, Data Raven, Hunter, Matrix Analyzer, and Sea Source. That might be all of them.
You're welcome, Steve. Yeah, maybe that might be all of them.
There's probably one in Wayland or something that I'm forgetting. Maybe Shadow.
Oh, there's Ichi, yeah, and Shadow. Yeah, Shadow. Was Shadow core set? I think Shadow was, yeah.
I'm not positive, but I think it might have been.
Yeah, let's just name every card in the game, actually, so Steve has to put them all up.
Right.
Exodia, Left Arm of the Forbidden One, Imposter Professor Oak,
Pokemon Center.
A samurai guy from Legend of the Five Rings.
Wall of Thorns.
Wall of Thorns. Red Reverse.
But the point being, not a lot of traces.
Yeah, not a lot of traces, and really what NBN ended up being known for was obviously not traces. So this identity didn't come up a lot.
It did not. I will say that I probably encountered this particular ID a lot more than the average person did, particularly late in the game's life cycle, because Steve, who edits this podcast, loved playing this and still does with a particular deck that was an Aryabhata prison deck. And the basic idea of it is he's going to drown you in so many traces, and on each of these traces, Aryabhata Tech is going to give him a credit or lose you a credit, and he's just going to make you poor and then slowly chip you to death with door-to-door tracing you and then pinging you, and it was just an awful experience to play against this deck. He would just cut you to death.
Basically, he just really tunnel visioned on the most unfun deck that he could make that involves traces.
Correct. He just wanted to constantly trace you on your turn and on his turn and just bleed you dry while you were helpless to watch and just sitting there watching it happen.
He was like, "No, dude, traces are cool. I promise. See."
Yeah, they were not cool.
They were not cool, but yeah, it's hard to kind of say too much more about this identity, because once NBN finally got alternatives that mattered at all, because the problem is once they made like the first alternative identity that they made for NBN was also blank, kind of, because it just lets you hold one more card and then you could make a slimmer deck, which I think benefited a lot of people. But
the World Is Yours was really about making a 40 card deck instead of a 49 card deck. It's just for leanness and speed. I played a lot of The World Is Yours, and it was just about that. It was, I'm going to run a lot of gear check ice and just sprint to the finish line.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who were running, the really quick, speedy, fast advance, kind of classic NBN deck, jumped ship to that identity.
Mm-hmm. I was one of those scummy people.
Yeah. While I think the people that did stick around on this identity, probably did so, just if they were going to continue to run the Sea Scorched package.
Yes.
Just so that they could kind of have the dual threat win conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you were going to be just a degenerate piece of garbage, then yeah, you were going to switch over to The World Is Yours, probably.
Yeah, it just runs leaner and faster. But I will say, the other kind of meta effector that this ID had was just Scorch NBN. And the funny thing about NBN is you could spend basically all your influence on 2 or 3 copies of Scorched Earth. And then you could still have a really, really, really threatening fast advance deck just with AstroScript pilot program, even if you didn't include Sansan Citygrid, which you did, because of course you did.
Yeah.
Even while you were focused on just landing, say, a mid-season replacements to drown them in tags, or a single sea source to scorch them, or my personal favorite, playing this sort of deck, sneakily install double advancing a breaking news when you know that the runner can't get to it, scoring it on your next turn, and then nuking them.
Yeah. A lot of flexibility that not necessarily this identity gave you, because, I mean, really...
Though the credits for traces did help with mid-season and Sea Source.
Yeah, for sure. It was just a cherry on top. If this identity was just blank, NBN would basically be just as strong.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which I think is a little bit of a problem, but not with this identity. It's with NBN and their cards as a whole.
It's AstroScript's fault. Let's be very clear about that.
Yeah, and I guess we'll get there when we get to AstroScript. But
yes.
But yeah, that's not Making News' fault. That's not the 2 recurring credits for Trace's fault.
No.
But if you had to change something about this identity, would you change anything, or would you keep it the same?
It's hard to say, because this identity how I perceived it is such a consequence of everything that was around it.
Right.
And I would change a lot of those things, and I would change those things before I changed this ID.
Yeah,
And then I'd want to know how it fit.
this would probably be the bottom of the totem pole if you were going to go through and sort of dismantle and, fix NBN.
Yeah. I would get rid of the traces, find something else to be theirs.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I mean, obviously, I would just get rid of traces as a mechanic, and
Yes.
then go from there. But how do we feel about the flavor of NBN?
I mean, as a whole, for the faction, I very much enjoy NBN's flavor. Creepy corporate news is absolute peak cyberpunk and just late stage capitalism, and I really enjoy that. The flavor of this particular card, it's the same kind of vanilla stuff that you get out of all of them.
I mean, I see. So NBN really is the scariest of all of the factions because it's real. This just exists.
Right, this could just say MSNBC or Fox or any number of them.
Yeah, this is just real life. That's the scariest cyberpunk megacorp because we're living it.
This is corporate journos, the faction.
Yep. But I will say that I do like the flavor on this card specifically, just because of the making news. What do you call that?
Double entendre.
No, I like what is the word for that? Because there's NBN making news and NBN the world is yours. Like, what is that?
Subtitle.
Subtitle. Yeah, there we go. I like the making news subtitle, just because of all of the implications and kind of like you said, the double entendre, and that they are making news.
Yes.
And so I always thought that was very clever. And then someone is always watching. Also, I think that fits really well too.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a thumbs up for the flavor.
So now here comes what I think may be the most difficult part of this conversation that we're going to have about this identity, is rating it.
It's complicated.
Where do you put this? Like, how do you really put this on the scale? Because like you mentioned, like so many of our like notions and our opinions about NBN and this identity and them as a faction has nothing to do with this card.
Yeah. And due to that, I'm gonna give it a 2. I'm gonna give it 2 recurring credits out of 5.
Interesting.
Because they missed an opportunity to do something interesting with this ID, and I feel like they did a lot of that in the core set. To be honest,
Sure.
Jinteki is far and away the best of them.
Yeah,
this is missing something that I want.
I guess I could agree. It seems like a cop out.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I can understand the reasons for just wanting simple abilities.
Yeah.
That speak to some of the base mechanics. So maybe for that reason, I'll bump it up to a 3.
Yeah, that's where I was, I think, going to sit with it, is a 3. Because like it's not offensive by any means, but it's also not super badass or super strong or super cool.
It's not like it's flatulent at the dinner table, but it will talk about its business meetings.
Yeah, and ultimately nobody really cares, and everybody's kind of just waiting for you to stop talking.
Yes.
All right. Well, a 3 is where it will be, from you and from me.
No more rhymes now. I mean it.
And it is the color of P.
Ugh.
All right. Well, with that seems as good of a spot as any to call that an episode.
Don't forget, NBN is watching you.
Yep, NBN, much like myself, is always watching you outside of your window at exactly 3:15 a.m. Have a good night.